Have you ever wondered what the real origins were to the bootleg SpongeBob episode Red Mist and Squidward's suicide? Well, here's the real story. The story starts with a seemingly normal kid named Nick Estevik. He was a normal kid who got in trouble like every other child, but a little bit more than others. Whenever Nick got in trouble, he'd always have these angry outbursts and temporarily lose control over himself, as if something was wrong with him inside of his head. One day when he was 16, he did something horrible to his one friend by the name of Chris. I won't go into much details of exactly what he did. However, it was so bad that his parents took away literally everything that he owned, his video games, computer, television, other things away from him. Let's just say it ended in a gruesome death. After that, he was never the same again. One day, his mom saw him in his room, in a fetal position, muttering some sort of weird things, or reciting some sort of weird poem that she couldn't understand. After snapping him out of it, they took him to the hospital. During their car ride there, he was shouting at his parents what possibly were swear words. They were forced to put duct tape over his mouth and his arms and legs to keep him from kicking the seat and hurting anyone. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctor called his parents in a room, and Nick was in a secluded area. When his parents were in the room with the doctor, his mother asked, "What's wrong with our son?" The doctor replied with, "Your son, after intensive exams, has schizophrenia." "Oh my goodness," said both of Nick's parents at the same exact time. Every day after the doctor's appointments, Nick's schizophrenia got progressively worse and worse. He started to cut himself and watch SpongeBob SquarePants endlessly. At the time, they gave him back his television. He also started trying to steal from his family. One day, his parents weren't home. He'd ride his bike to the nearest electronics superstore and stole a computer, a PC to be exact, a DVD, a VCR player, Adobe Premiere Pro, a blank VHS videotape cassette, and a DVD to VHS burner. Now, how did he buy all this without getting caught or arrested, you may ask? Well, Nick ran out of the store, and before any of the staff could come and get him, he stabbed them repeatedly with a rusty knife until he knew for an absolute fact that they were dead. He then went out and murdered various children and ripped their guts out and stored them in his bag and took pictures. He then threw their bodies in the trash and cleaned up all the evidence. Then once he got home, in case you were wondering, his parents both have jobs to which they have them working pretty much every single day, all day long. He set up his computer and installed the video software. What he wanted to do with all of this was make a special version of SpongeBob SquarePants, since it was his favorite show, of course. The plot he was thinking of was that there was an Irish salesperson, or in this case Fish, trying to warn Squidward of a red mist that was coming. Squidward ignored, slamming the door in the salesman's face. Next, while Squidward was practicing, SpongeBob and Patrick made noises outside. He then asked them to be quiet because he had a concert to practice for. SpongeBob and Patrick then start crying. Then the red mist the Irish salesfish was talking about earlier engulfed Squidward, causing him to get those disgustingly red, hyper-realistic eyes. Then right before the concert, the people in audience, including SpongeBob, Patrick, and the Irish salesfish were there, also received the same red eyes. When Squidward performed a song he dubbed Red Mist, everyone in the audience started booing him in a way that was not cartoonish. Then, completely upset and devastated, Squidward left the concert. Later at his house, he heard voices in his head saying, "Do it!" And then, after a long time, Squidward grabbed a gun, presumably a shotgun, aimed it in his mouth, and then pulled the trigger, killing himself instantly. After making the plot, he grabbed a SpongeBob episode where Squidward had a concert, back when you could do that kind of thing without really getting into much trouble, and edited it based on the plot, adding his own voice, like when Squidward slammed the door and the sales fish, saying, "Not interested." Then after editing it all, Nick put it on a DVD. The DVD didn't have the red mist elements. He put the final version of it, which was on a file, then on a blank VHS. The next day his parents got really angry at him for murdering one of his neighbors because his neighbor, who was to remain unnamed for respect for the dead, was complaining about the noise coming from his computer and TV. If you were wondering where his parents weren't home, he hid all his equipment in a big box above his clothes dresser. Also, the scene where Squidward is sitting on his bed, there, faint sound as if it was a slight breeze through a forest came up. There is also the sound of children crying, which must have been from the children he murdered. Turns out it was Squidward because he was pulling his tentacles over his face. You could also see blood dripping from his eyes as he uncovered them. As the scene progressed, the wind through the forest sound became a gale, and you could hear branches snapping and the crying sound turn into a cry, as if one of the people had just had their limbs snapped off. Now back to Nick. Nick's parents pissed him off so much that he decided to off himself. But to make his death big, he had to make his parents watch the Red Mist VHS. He also wrote a letter and put it on top of the tape. "Dear family, I've created an alternative version of SpongeBob, the episode I've dubbed Red Mist, to remember me by, before my quote-unquote accidental death. I even hooked up an old VCR for you to watch it. Enjoy, and goodbye. Yours truly, Nick Ivonic." Now, if you're wondering how I know all this, it's because I'm the neighbor of Nick, the one who didn't get murdered. When Nick's mom screamed at the top of her lungs, I ran over to see what was going on. When she told me, I was stunned for at least a minute. She told me that Nick had hung himself with a rope on a ceiling fan in his room, and right under the fan were various internal organs, and a pool of blood right next to him with a knife. Now, after snapping myself out of it, which took quite a while, she invited me in. She also told me that he made a version of SpongeBob SquarePants called Red Mist, and that Nick wanted them to watch it. After gathering her husband and the other neighbors, Nick's older brother, Daniel, Nick's aunt and her husband, they all started to watch the tape together. After watching the Red Mist video, everyone was stunned, but to a lesser extent for Nick's parents because they had seen it before. After watching, Nick's mom called his grandmother, his cousins, and other relatives who lived far from him to tell them the horrible things that had happened. The next day, Nick's mom had some people take his body away. Surprisingly enough, it was actually in good condition for the funeral. The cut he made on himself was relatively small, so it was easy to stitch up. She also had to replace his bed sheets because the fan was right above his bed. She also bought a nice casket for the funeral for a few $1,000s. During the funeral, almost all of Nick's relatives, friends, and neighbors attended. Nick's mom started off the funeral about how much she loved Nick, and talked about how much he died in the SpongeBob SquarePants episode that he made, and told everyone at the funeral to watch the tape. A man who worked at the funeral wheeled in a TV, the tape, and the VCR. His mom, after putting the tape in the VCR, looked away, not wanting to watch it again. As I was in the funeral watching it again, it only helped to imprint the entirety of it in my mind. The horror was indescribable. After the funeral, Nick's mom and dad tried to search his room for anything how he could have created that tape. When they found the PC, the DVD, which was slightly burnt for whatever reason, and had a Squidward suicide title card instead of a red mist etched into it, and Adobe Premiere Pro software in a huge box covered by shoes, clothes, and toys from his childhood. They decided to add the pics in the video to the of the mutilated kids that were in the folder of the DVD in very short intervals into Squidward's suicide. Then they gave the DVD to me so that they would be the only people that have to see their son's horrifying morbid death. But seeing that picture caused him to restore it and never be the same again. They feared the red mist. They feared that it would affect them in ways that they would have never thought. They feared it would never go away. They feared the regular mist would come almost every day early in the morning. They even thought by committing suicide that they'd be the only ones to avoid it. Just then I got a phone call from Nick's aunt's husband that she had committed suicide in the same exact way that Nick did, along with all the internal organs on their bed. Phone call by phone call, all the relatives died in the same exact way. Why was this happening to all these people? I don't understand. I just don't. I heard some noises coming from Nick's house, so hesitantly I walked over to investigate. No response came to the front door when I rang the doorbell, so I jumped the fence, and to my surprise, the back door wasn't locked. After walking upstairs, what I saw absolutely horrified me. Nick's parents had offed themselves the same way Nick had, as well as the other family members. I violently threw up at the sight of the bodies, not even bothering to clean any of it up. I couldn't stay there any longer. I went home to my computer and wrote down all the events that happened to Nick's parents and relatives and neighbors that they all told me about before they killed themselves, of course. I then gave the DVD to a closest friend of mine that had a child so he could deal with hell. I had to deal with it to be free from that fucking red mist. I honestly hope that I never see anything like that again.